guys, in today's video I'm going to be showing you my winter riding routine. I'm also going to show you one of my favourite exercises that I do with all my horses and you can try with your horse. So the exercise I am going to be doing today and showing you how to do is the shallow loops. So this can be done in walk, trot and canter. It's also sometimes called 5-meter loops, but I like to call it shallow loops so that you can determine how big they are. You don't have to be stuck to just 5 meters. And this is an amazing exercise. It's one that I use all the time with whatever level of horse I've got. So Wilf is at Grand Prix. But something that I'm really passionate about is whatever level your horse is doing, it's so important to work on the basics, and this exercise is one of those that will really help that. So to do this exercise, what you're going to do is you're going to go large, and starting from the first corner of a long side, you are going to use the first marker to slowly peel away from the long side. If you're on a more unbalanced horse or novice horse, don't worry too much about it being the first marker. You can go up a couple of strides because obviously you can't go into the corner as much. And then when you start peeling away from the wall, what you're going to do is, if you're doing 5-meter loops, you want to aim for the 3/4 line. If you're doing 10-meter loops, you want to aim for the center line. And you want to get to the center line when you are level with the EXB line. And then once you get there, you slowly peel back to the same long side, aiming for the last marker. So you come away from the long side and then you slowly, gradually go back to the long side. You try and make it as equal as possible. So the first half should look very symmetrical to the second half. Obviously this is very difficult, but that is part of it as well, is that it's really improving your accuracy when you're riding. So you can do this exercise in walk, trot and canter, and like I mentioned, on any level horse it's going to help. If you do it in the walk, what I find easier, because it's quite a long kind of winded exercise when you're just doing one, is I like to do 2 little ones. So if you're going to be doing that, and you can do this in trot and canter, but I'm going to demo it for you in walk, is you would come away at the first marker, and then if you split your arena in half, you want to make sure you get back to the wall by the E line, or if you're on the B side, the B side. And then once you hit the wall, you come away again to do another loop. So you'll end up doing 2 shallow loops on the long side. Again, what I look for with this is trying to make it as symmetrical as possible. So the reason this exercise is so beneficial for the horses is because a big common problem that people face when they're riding is not being able to control the outside shoulder on the horse. So if you're on a 20-meter circle and you feel like your horse is always drifting out, you can't keep them on the line. Also, if you struggle with your horse being crooked, if they put their quarters in, that can be that they're falling through the outside shoulder. So often it can be very difficult when you're going up the long side to move the quarters over when you haven't got control of the outside shoulder, and this is what that exercise is doing. And because you're almost removing the outside shoulder away from the wall, you're really having to use your outside rein, sometimes outside leg as well, and start to get control of that. So what that helps is straightness, and it also helps the horses to get better balance because they can't rely on the wall, they're having to find a little bit more balance. In the canter, that's actually the way we start to introduce counter canter, is doing this exercise. So again, it's just getting them a little bit more balanced by themselves. Once the horse is more balanced, you'll find that they can be more uphill, they become softer in the rein, they become in a better frame, and it just helps lots of different things. So a few of my top tips to watch out for when you're doing this exercise is that when you are coming away from the wall, but especially when you're going back to the wall, you need to be careful that the horse doesn't fall through the shoulder and almost rush back to the wall. So how I tend to counteract that if they're trying to do it is just by thinking of a tiny little bit of outside flexion, not too much. And of course we don't want to keep that forever. We want the horse to be nice and straight. But if you're really struggling to move the horse's shoulder over, don't be afraid to have a little bit of outside bend just to stop them falling through the leg. If you can do that without the outside bend and just keep the horse's neck completely straight in front of you, that's great. But in the exercise, what you're looking for is not too much inside bend, Otherwise, again, the shoulders are really tricky to control. Another thing that I do find when you first start doing this with horses is that they can come a little bit above the bit when you start doing the exercise. Again, that's because you're changing the horse's balance. Don't panic about this. Very often when you just carry on doing the exercise, the horse starts to become in a better balance and they start to relax into the frame again. So the winter months have rolled in and we've been thinking about how different it is with the horses in the winter. Now, we have done a video all around the yard routine changing, but we wanted to talk about how the riding has changed. So training wise, we don't actually use the winter time to kind of like drop the horses off as in give them a break, because we think it's really important when they have a break that they can be in the fields lots, and obviously that's tricky in the winter. So actually the winter is the time where we really think about moving them on a little bit more in their training. So if a horse has competed a certain level through the year, the winter is where we will go, okay, let's start doing teaching them the new things, strengthening them, all that sort of thing. But we do have to balance that alongside competing them. Although there aren't any like big shows, so like the high profiles, the Premier Leagues, or even international stuff, you do have to qualify them for the regionals, or we like to. So there is a lot of competing still. I actually had a show last week, and then my next show is on the 2nd of January. So it is quite condensed together. So alongside riding and hacking them, and obviously like doing the jumping and the lunging, something that I'm really passionate about as well is doing a lot of groundwork, and the winter is actually a perfect time for me to focus on this, especially with the young horses that may not have been having as much of my time when we're going around competing. This is kind of the time where I can spend with them on building their confidence. So even things like just starting with like hang raising them, teaching them to be a little bit more confident in their body. And the groundwork that I use is the one that Tristan Tucker does. It's so good. I think I've been doing it now for like 2.5 years, maybe 3. It was a massive learning curve. It was kind of like learning to drive. You know, you're like, I don't feel like I can do this. But then when you start to get it, understand the horses more, it's just incredible to bond with them. All my horses feel so much more confident, so much more supple. The horse that I've got here is actually a 4-year-old. He's a babby. By the way, he's just had a bath, that's why he's wet. We don't do the groundwork when they're wet. But I just wanted to bring him in here to have him. So he is 4 and he does a lot of the groundwork stuff. And it just makes them so much more confident in their body, in kind of feeling their body, in bonding with me as well. They're much more trusting with me. They're easier to handle, whether that's in the arena or out the arena. It's just really, really good. And I feel like I understand horses a lot more. So for me, I use the winter time to really like deep dive into learning. I think when you're learning something new, you've got to give yourself time and space and energy to actually do that. So yeah, the winter's a great time for that. When they're doing this exercise, it's really good for their core. Also, if you expect them to be in balance when you're on them, they should be in balance when you're not on them. So let's talk about expectations of training in the winter. I did mention at the beginning that through the winter we try and move the horses on to the next level. We work on trying to strengthen them. But life is not that black and white, and horses are not that black and white. So I may start with wanting to do something, but from my experience in the winters that have been, it never happens like that. And when you have multiple horses as well, it's very rare that every single horse progresses exactly how you want it to in that certain amount of time. So I try to really just move with the horses and like listen to them day to day. I do have a kind of like a vague goal of what I want to be doing with them. For example, let's use Zach, who is my 7-year-old. He's just qualified medium and advanced medium for the regionals. So now the plan is to start to do more of the PSG stuff with him. Now, that is kind of my like vague goal, but each time I get on him, if I was very like regimented and like, right, we have to do the PSG stuff today, and he maybe was a little bit stiff or not through enough, and actually he needed to do some basic stuff for a week or a couple of weeks, then that wouldn't be benefiting him and it wouldn't be benefiting the training. It also just leaves you feeling so frustrated that you're not pushing and moving on quick enough. And I think now that I've taken a horse to Grand Prix, I've really realised that it's just not as big a rush as you think. You can really take your time with doing the basics and take a longer period of time to get to the end result. So we are in the trusty lorry because this is where we spend most of our time when we go away to shows. So in the winter, like I mentioned, there's none of the like big shows, but we still go to the smaller ones for qualifying. But I also find it really important to not just have a massive gap from competing, but to keep going. For myself mentally, so that it's not a big deal when I next go out and I'm not nervous and I don't tense up when I ride. Also, it's really good to kind of keep your eye in with it. So when I'm training, to know that I'm going in the right direction that the judges want to see. And also, I think the horses really enjoy going out. I'm actually going to take my 5-year-old out soon because I just feel that they really enjoy the experience. Whenever they come home after it as well, they're so much more confident in themselves. They really like that one-to-one time, so it's great for them. And with the older horses, they maybe don't compete as much, so the Grand Prix ones don't need to go out as much because they're experienced. But what we will do with them is take them to away lessons, so go to my trainer's yard, have some lessons there. Again, just getting them out, keeping them stimulated, keeping them happy. So there you have it, guys. That is the end of the video. I would love to hear from you what you'll be working on with your horse over the winter. Also, I'd love for you guys to try the exercise that I showed you and then come back and let me know how you are finding it. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask and I will get back to you. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this one.